Guillermo Del Toro, a now legendary director who never shies away from the dark, the grotesque and the fantastical. What about him? From shaping modern comic book cinema to heartfelt fairy tales, and from giant robot blockbusters to bringing his own adaptation of the iconic Frankenstein tale, let's get into it! Please help your favorite average movie guy get to 1,000 subscribers by subscribing right now. Early films and breakthrough. Cronos, 1992. After directing episodes of Hora Marcada by the early 90s, Guillermo Del Toro was a young Mexican filmmaker with a background in special effects and makeup design, but still relatively unknown outside his home country. That changed with his first feature, a film that already contained so many of the themes and obsessions that would define his entire career. At its core, Cronos is a vampire film, but unlike the gothic castles of Dracula, this story takes place in modern Mexico City, inside an antique shop. The plot revolves around Jesus Gris, an elderly antiques dealer who discovers a strange golden device, the Cronos mechanism. When activated, it pierces his skin and begins to grant him youth and vitality, but also an insatiable thirst for blood. What makes Cronos different from traditional vampire stories is how it treats immorality not as power but as tragedy. Jesus doesn't want to drink blood, and he doesn't want eternal life. He's caught between his growing dependence on the device and his love for his granddaughter. The film is small in scale but rich in imagery, mechanical insects, decaying bodies, Catholic symbolism. Already, Del Toro was showing his fascination with the intersection of the sacred and the profane, the beautiful and the grotesque. Critics praised it for its originality and visual flair, calling it one of the most striking genre debuts of the decade. It also went on to win 9 Ariel Awards, Mexico's equivalent of the Oscars. For Del Toro, Cronos was more than a debut, it was a mission statement.
No te asustes. No te asustes.
The Devil's Backbone, 2001. After directing Mimic, a frustrating stint in Hollywood, Del Toro returned to Spain to make what he considers his first true masterpiece. It's a ghost story set in 1939, during the final year of the Spanish Civil War, inside a remote orphanage where a bomb sits unexploded in the courtyard. The story follows Carlos, a young boy sent there after his father's death, who soon discovers the ghost of another child haunting the halls. But like all of Del Toro's films, the ghost is not the real villain. The true horrors come from the living: greed, betrayal, cruelty, and the violence of war. The spectre is instead a symbol of trauma, a reminder of violence that refuses to be buried. Visually, the film blends dusty, sunlit realism with eerie, spectral imagery. Blood floating in water, shadows stretching through corridors, the bomb looming like a silent witness. Del Toro was already refining a signature blend of the historical and the fantastical, turning horror into allegory. The film premiered to strong acclaim, with critics praising its haunting atmosphere, political resonance, and emotional depth. Over the years, it has come to be regarded as one of the finest gothic ghost stories ever made. Commercially, it performed well for a Spanish-language horror film, grossing over $6.5 million worldwide. For Del Toro, The Devil's Backbone was proof that fantasy and horror could be used not as escapism, but as a lens through which to examine history and human cruelty. It was the film that firmly established his identity as a filmmaker of both monsters and memory. Diving into franchises. Blade 2, 2002. The following year, Del Toro returned to Hollywood for his first major studio project, with the sequel to Marvel's cult hit Blade from 1998. Wesley Snipes reprises his role as Blade, the half-human, half-vampire warrior who hunts the undead. But this time, the story flips the premise. Blade is forced to team up with a squad of elite vampires to combat a new mutation known as the Reapers, creatures so vicious they feed on both humans and vampires alike. This setup gave Del Toro the perfect excuse to unleash his imagination. The Reapers are grotesque, with jaws that split open like predators, a design pulled straight from his sketchbooks. The film is filled with gothic layers, crimson-soaked fight sequences, and bone-crunching martial arts. It was proof that Del Toro could combine his love for monsters with sleek Hollywood action. The production wasn't small, and Del Toro used it to create a darker, more stylized sequel that leaned heavily into horror imagery. Critics received it well, with many calling it an improvement over the original, and fans embraced its mix of bloody spectacle and inventive creature design. Commercially, it was a success. Blade 2 grossed over $155 million worldwide, making it one of the more profitable Marvel films before the MCU era. For Del Toro, it was validation that he could handle large-scale studio filmmaking without losing his unique voice, a balance he would carry into his next project.
Not know who you are fucking with!
Hellboy, 2004. Fresh off the success of Blade 2, Del Toro finally had the clout to pursue a passion project he'd been chasing for years. an adaptation of Mike Mignola's cult comic Hellboy. It is a story of a monster who chooses to fight for humanity. Summoned by Nazis during World War II, Hellboy grows up under the care of Professor Bruttenholm and eventually becomes a paranormal investigator for the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense. With his massive stone hands, sardonic wit, and cigar-chomping attitude, he's a demon caught between two worlds, duty to humanity and the dark destiny he was born into. For Del Toro, it was the perfect marriage of comic book action and gothic fairy tale. The film is packed with Lovecraftian horrors, occult imagery, and a sense of humor that keeps it from ever feeling too grim. Ron Perlman, obviously a favorite collaborator of Del Toro, embodied Hellboy so completely that it's hard to imagine anyone else in the role, even though David Harbour tried it 1.5 decades later. The production wasn't easy. Studios were initially hesitant, arguing that a red-skinned demon with horns wouldn't appeal to mainstream audiences. But Del Toro insisted, and he delivered a superhero film that felt completely different from anything else of the time. Critics praised Hellboy for its imagination, Perlman's performance, and Del Toro's unique vision. While it wasn't a runaway blockbuster, grossing almost $100 million worldwide, it built a loyal cult following. Over time, its reputation has only grown, especially as comic book films have become more formulaic. Hellboy stands out as bold, weird, and unmistakably personal.
Come on, champ. Let's go fight some monsters.
Pan's Labyrinth, 2006. After proving he could handle Hollywood spectacle, Del Toro returned to Spain for what many consider his greatest achievement. Set in 1944 in the aftermath of the Spanish Civil War, the film follows a young girl named Ophelia who moves with her pregnant mother to live with her new stepfather, a fascist captain. In the shadow of his cruelty, she discovers an ancient labyrinth and meets a mysterious faun who tells her she may be the reincarnation of a lost princess. To prove it, she must complete 3 dangerous tasks. The brilliance of Pan's Labyrinth lies in how it intertwines brutal historical reality with myth and fantasy. The pale man with his eyes in his hands and the faun who is never fully trustworthy are not just creatures of imagination but metaphors for the violence and moral choices surrounding Ophelia. Del Toro's vision was ambitious, but the result was breathtaking. The film went on to become a cultural phenomenon. It grossed over $83 million worldwide, a remarkable figure for a Spanish-language fantasy. Critics hailed it as a modern masterpiece. At the Academy Awards, it was nominated 6 times and won 3: Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Makeup. But more importantly, it solidified Del Toro as one of the most important filmmakers of his generation. With Pan's Labyrinth, he proved that fantasy could be as profound and politically charged as any serious drama. It wasn't just a storybook for adults, it was a dark, tragic fairy tale about innocence, brutality, and the enduring power of imagination. Hellboy 2: The Golden Army, 2008. After the critical triumph, Del Toro returned to the world of comic books. With more creative freedom and a bigger budget, he doubled down on the things that made the first film stand out. This time, Hellboy takes on Prince Nuada, an exiled elf determined to awaken an unstoppable army of mechanical soldiers to wage war on humanity. The film expands the mythology far beyond the first installment. Visually, it's one of Del Toro's richest films. Every corner of the screen teems with detail, from ancient gods to clockwork monsters. It's also a more personal story, exploring Hellboy's struggle between his love for Liz and his uneasy place in the human world. The budget climbed and Del Toro poured it fully into world building. Critics praised its imagination and artistry, calling it one of the most visually inventive comic book films ever made. Commercially, it did solid business as well, grossing about $168 million worldwide. Over time, Hellboy 2 has grown in reputation, often cited as one of the most distinctive superhero sequels of its era.
I couldn't hear you from all the way over there.
Pacific Rim, 2013. After years of unrealized projects, Del Toro shifted gears and delivered one of his most ambitious films. It was his love letter to the kaiju and mecha genres he grew up watching, blending Japanese monster movies with anime-inspired spectacle. The premise is straightforward but grand. Humanity is under siege from massive creatures emerging from the ocean depths, and the only defense lies in giant machines called Jaegers, piloted by 2 humans who share a psychic link. The story follows Rayleigh Beckett, a washed-up pilot, and Mako Mori, a rookie with a tragic past, as they join forces to turn the tide of the war. What sets Pacific Rim apart is Del Toro's sense of scale and weight. The battles between Jaegers and kaiju aren't quick-cut or chaotic, they're staged like titanic wrestling matches, with every blow rippling across cities and oceans. Neon-lit rain, collapsing skyscrapers, and pounding metal create an operatic spectacle that still feels grounded in emotion. Critics praise the film's visual imagination and its earnest embrace of genre conventions. While its domestic box office was modest, it became a huge international success, particularly in Asia, and ultimately grossed over $411 million worldwide, becoming Del Toro's highest-grossing film. Fans celebrated this as a blockbuster that wore its heart on its sleeve, unashamed of its pulp inspirations. For Del Toro, Pacific Rim proved he could deliver pure spectacle on the largest possible canvas without sacrificing his personal style.
You wouldn't have picked my brother Yancey and I for heroes. No chance.
Crimson Peak, 2015. After the bombastic scale, Del Toro turned inward with a return to gothic romance and ghost stories. The film follows Edith Cushing, an aspiring writer in early 20th century America who falls in love with the charming but mysterious Thomas Sharp. She marries him and moves into his decaying English mansion, Allerdale Hall, where she discovers secrets about his family and begins to encounter restless, terrifying spirits. Del Toro described Crimson Peak not as a horror film, but as a gothic romance. The ghosts are frightening with their bleeding, skeletal forms, but like in The Devil's Backbone, they serve as warnings rather than simple monsters. Visually, the film is stunning. Allerdale Hall feels alive. Its walls bleed red clay, snow drifts through broken ceilings, and its corridors seem endless. Every frame is meticulously designed, a love letter to Victorian melodrama and classic Gothic cinema. Reception was mixed on release. Some audiences expected a traditional horror film and were surprised by its romantic, tragic tone. But critics praised its lush design, atmosphere, and ambition. Commercially, it performed pretty well, grossing over $74 million worldwide. In time, Crimson Peak has been reassessed as one of Del Toro's most underappreciated works. It was a passion project, proof that he could still follow his obsessions, even when they didn't align with mainstream expectations.
Edith, you don't know. Edith and I are leaving.
Creating a Best Picture. The Shape of Water, 2017. After over 2 decades, Del Toro reached the peak of his career, creating a film that was both a fairy tale and an Oscar-winning triumph. Set in Cold War America, the story follows Elisa, a mute janitor working in a government laboratory. There, she discovers a captive amphibian creature, worshipped as a god in South America, but now treated as a scientific specimen. As she bonds with him, their connection turns into love, setting the stage for a daring escape and a tale of compassion against cruelty. The film is at once tender and radical. Del Toro reimagines the classic creature from the Black Lagoon not as a monster but as a romantic lead. Themes of loneliness, otherness, and acceptance flow through the narrative, while the villains are men in suits, embodiments of power, conformity, and fear. Visually, the film is bathed in aquatic greens and blues, every frame designed like a dream. The score, whimsical yet melancholic, underscores the story's blend of fantasy and romance. Critics embraced it immediately, praising its originality and emotional depth. It became both a critical and commercial success, earning nearly $200 million worldwide. At the Academy Awards, it won 4 Oscars: Best Original Score, Best Production Design, Best Director, and Best Picture, cementing Del Toro's place in the pantheon of great filmmakers. While some audiences, including myself, didn't fully align with this praise and see it as a weaker Best Picture winner, still, for Del Toro, The Shape of Water was the fulfillment of a lifelong belief that monsters are not to be feared, but loved.
Does he have a...
Nightmare Alley, 2021. After the Oscar triumph, Del Toro took a sharp turn, trading fairy tales for film noir with his adaptation of Nightmare Alley. It was another passion project, revisiting the 1946 novel by William Lindsay Gresham and the classic 1947 film, but giving it Del Toro's own shadowy spin. The story follows Stanton Carlyle, a drifter with a mysterious past who joins a traveling carnival. There, he learns the tricks of mentalism and showmanship, climbing his way into high society as a celebrated psychic. But the higher he rises, the more dangerous his games become, especially when he crosses paths with the calculating psychiatrist Dr. Lilith Ritter. Del Toro leans into darkness, stripping away any trace of fantasy. Instead, he crafts a tale of greed, ambition, and self-destruction. The carnival setting, full of grotesque sideshows and strange beauty, is pure Del Toro. But once Stanton leaves it behind, the world grows colder, more elegant, and far deadlier. Its ensemble cast gave weight to its moral fable. Critics praised its craft and atmosphere, though some found its pacing slow compared to Del Toro's more fantastical works. Commercially, it struggled a bit, grossing only about $40 million worldwide. But it still earned 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. Further proof of Del Toro's ability to command critical respect, even when audiences didn't fully follow.
I was born for it.
Diversifying his portfolio. Guillermo Del Toro's Pinocchio, 2022. After years of darkness, Del Toro finally brought to life a project he had been dreaming of for more than a decade. A stop-motion reimagining of Pinocchio. Unlike the sanitized versions most audiences knew, this was a story rooted in grief, politics, and faith. The film relocates Carlo Gallotti's tale to fascist Italy in the 1930s. It begins with the death of a carpenter's young son, Carlo. In his grief, Geppetto carves a wooden boy who is unexpectedly brought to life by a forest spirit. But unlike the obedient puppet of Disney's version, this Pinocchio is mischievous, deviant, and constantly questioning the world around him. From the authority of his father to the demands of Mussolini's regime. Visually, the film is extraordinary. Every frame of the stop-motion animation feels handmade, full of texture and life, with puppets that are simultaneously strange and beautiful. Once again, Del Toro turns a fantasy into an allegory about love, loss, and the cost of being human. The project was long in the making, with multiple studios passing before Netflix finally backed it. When it was released, critics hailed it as a masterpiece of animation, praising both its artistry and its emotional depth. It went on to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, cementing Del Toro's place not only as a master of live-action fantasy, but also as one of the most daring voices in animation.
That was so much fun, Papa!
You're not my son!
Frankenstein 2025. Now we get to Del Toro's newest project, again for Netflix. As many films before, he has called it one of his lifelong obsessions. For decades, he dreamed of adapting Mary Shelley's novel, even keeping a room in his home filled with Frankenstein memorabilia. Now, with this upcoming film, that dream is finally becoming reality. The project brings together a striking cast. Rather than focusing only on the horror of the monster, Del Toro has promised a deeply human story about creation, rejection, and the longing to be loved. Obviously focusing on a brilliant but egotistical scientist who brings a creature to life in a monstrous experiment that ultimately leads to the undoing of both the creator and his tragic creation. Expect gothic design, emotional intensity, and a creature portrayed with both terror and sympathy. Like many films before, it's another chance for Del Toro to ask us who are the real monsters. It is said that Del Toro has found humanity in one of cinema's most iconic monsters, with a lavish epic that gets its most invigorating vols from Jacob Elordi's stand-up performance as the monster. For Del Toro, Frankenstein feels less like a new chapter than a destiny fulfilled. After decades of shaping stories about misfits and monsters, he finally gets to tell the greatest monster story of them all.
Victor Frankenstein.
And there you have it, the full career of Guillermo Del Toro. From endless monster stories to blockbuster Hollywood. Now let me ask you, are you excited for Frankenstein? And what is your favorite Guillermo Del Toro film? Let me know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. I have been Dean, the average movie guy on your screen. Big thanks for watching. See you next time. Roll the credits.